Hey, what's up guys? Dishsoap here with the 14.3 headliner and comp tier list. And if you want to reference these comps during game, then I'd like to introduce you to the Mobalytics TFT overlay. You get access to the best team comps by challenger experts, myself included, directly in-game. There are also full guides attached to each comp, as well as automatic augment data and an item cheat sheet. Click the link in the description to download. This patch, honestly, wasn't that big. Slightly nerfed Heartsteel, buff stuff like Kayle, Senna, and some other stuff. It's pretty close to what it was last patch, so let's get into it. In the don't skip tier, we have Olaf and Heartsteel Cassante. Sentinel Cassante is probably like niche, maybe good with some item. Heartsteel Cassante I like never skip though, just because Heartsteel's so powerful. They nerfed Olaf 3, but didn't really affect the strength of just Olaf 2 at all, like his chosen. He's still a beast in the other game. You have items, he can easily 5-trick you. And then in the good with Stumble item tier, we have stuff like Jinx and Vi. Honestly, they're pretty mid with the items, but like, I don't know, Jinx with like 1 attack speed item starts becoming a menace pretty fast. Vi can actually shut down Olaf in the matchup. She actually did get like headliner nerfed as well, so she's a little bit weaker than last patch, but she still deserves A tier. Eva's decent, I think worse than Vi and Olaf, but I don't know, she can be good for you in the first few rounds. She falls off harder than the other two as well though. I would look to replace Eve like at start of stage 3. Tarek's pretty decent if you have Disco Opener. If you don't have Disco Opener, he's actually not that good though, but he can kill units. He's pretty tanky. Honestly, Nami's probably better than Tarek. Like Nami and the Disco Opener is still pretty decent. It's just awkward to pivot of the Disco Opener in the mid game right now, because usually you want to be playing on like Superfan and Heartsteel, and that kind of stuff doesn't really line up with what you want to do with Disco. But Nami's still pretty good for stage 2. She can actually be like the counter to Olaf with enough damage. She can shut down the melees pretty hard. Annie in this tier as well. If you have like Spellweaver Annie, no items, she's probably the worst headliner in the game, but like 1 to 2 items on EMO Annie, she becomes an absolute menace. So it's pretty feast or famine with her. Corki's just alright. If you need damage, he can give you like pretty unconditional damage. Don't really need that much setup with him, but he's not really as powerful as the other stuff. Yasuo and Kinch are a niche. I really only like Kinch if it's giving me like 4 Bruiser or 3 Country. Otherwise, he feels kind of like a waste because he does no damage. And then Yasuo, I think, is the worst of the melees, honestly. I also don't really like Yasuo Reroll that much. I think it's just too conditional. And then we have Lily and Kinnan in the skip tier. Yeah, I don't think you buy them unless you have damage upgrades already, because they don't really give you any damage baseline. For the 2 cost, you'll notice there's a gap here, and honestly, I think there is just like a big gap between how strong some of these headliners are. I think in the high tier, all these units can be either like rerolled, and they're also really, really strong in the mid game with items and can give you like streaks and stuff. And the other stuff is just not as good. If just going one by one, we have Kayle. Kayle's a menace. She got her rework last patch. She's been broken for a while. They did nerf her headliner this patch, less attack speed. Doesn't really matter. She's still really, really insane. Kaisa here, she's not as good as a reroll, but Chosen Kaisa is like the best item holder for Ezreal in like most other AD units in the mid game. She does lots of burst damage. She does really, really well with her items. Seraphine, probably the best like generic AP holder. Her reroll comp is pretty good. Fits really well with the Superfan stuff. Gnar as well. Chosen Gnar 3 items with the right setup in the mid game is actually unkillable. I've seen some people actually experiment with reroll Gnar. I can't really speak to how powerful it is because I haven't really tried it out that much myself. We also have Kat. I think she's actually weaker as a tempo unit than like everything else here, but I think she's still pretty strong as a reroll player with 4 Crowd Diver, give her like Hog, JJ, stuff like that. And then we have Bard. I think Bard's also a little bit weaker for tempo than Senna, but Bard reroll is pretty good. And he's still like a really, really good damage dealer. Like even for tempo purposes, Bard is better than all the stuff in the Met tiers. We also have Senna in this as well. I might be underrating her, honestly. She did get a pretty decent buff this last patch. I think I played Senna reroll once. I went like 3rd or 4th. But if you have like the right setup for her with like spats and a high tempo mid game, she can definitely do work after the buff. And then we have the Met tier. We have Gragas. I feel like whenever I have Gragas 1, I'm pretty happy because he has like the base healing, but I don't really see the point of chosen Gragas. He always feels meh. Jax actually did get buffed. He's actually like pretty viable, like the old Jax reroll comp, but I don't know. He's not really good with like anything besides like he's not really good until you get EDM in, right? You're almost never playing around EDM in the mid game. So he's just awkward. Then we have Garen. Garen actually got a pretty weak buff. Maybe I'm underrating him, but I don't know. I'm usually not that excited to buy Garen Chosen because I feel like you're just usually lacking damage. If you somehow have like a good upgraded backline damage dealer, Garen Chosen can be okay. I don't know. I don't really see it. Garen also got like there's some people experimenting with Garen reroll right now. In my opinion, it's trash. I've seen people on ladder play it, and I have not seen a single one top 4. But if you want to break the meta, you could force Garen reroll. Please queue into me when you do that though. We have Twitch and meh. I mean, honestly, even with like Executioner and Twin Terror being meta, I don't even think Twitch is that good. Now that stuff kind of got nerfed a little bit, I think Twitch deserved to go down a tier. Aphelios as a unit is meh, but if he's Heartsteel and he gives you Heartsteel, he's very good. And then C-tier's Panth. I cannot remember the last time I bought a Pantheon. Like maybe late stage 2, you really need like Guardian Panth to get a 5 streak or something. Otherwise, he's just not good. For 3 cost, I don't know. I feel like the 3 cost for headliner tier list doesn't really make that much sense, because when you're considering a 3 cost headliner, it's either 1, you're rerolling and you always want to reroll for a very specific headliner, or 2, you're just tempoing and you just buy what you get for like 3 or 4 rounds, because you usually just end up selling it. So for instance, I could put Riven in S tier, because Riven is probably the best 3 cost reroll this patch, but for like tempo purposes, she's not that good. I guess I can go over one by one if they're good for like tempo reroll or not. Yone and Riven, both good rerolls, both shit for tempo. We'll go over their comps later. They've nerfed 6 Executioner, 4 Executioner, made Vex a little less appealing. She's still like really, really good though. If you have AP, she can be an insane item holder for Karthus. Still very good unit. Samira can actually be a pretty decent item holder for like Ezreal and stuff. If you have, I've noticed she does well with like either IE Slam or if you have like Superfan IE already. And obviously you want to reroll her for Country or Executioner. Amumu is just a really, really solid frontline. I think he's like either him or Mord are like the best frontline headliners. Mord got nerfed, so maybe it's Amumu now. Mord's really good. I think after his nerf this patch, there was like a secret carry 3-star Mord going around, like duo carry Mord and Kayle. After his nerf, I think you just consider him as like just a tank now. Lulu's pretty good as well. I think I might be underestimating Lulu. She's probably about as good as Vex as an AP item holder, and Lulu reroll is like kind of like an offset of just Seraphine reroll. We can talk about it later. Urgot, I mean, you buy Urgot if you need to tempo him for a few rounds of items. He's kind of meta reroll. Same with MF. Set and Echo got nerfed recently. They're just whatever frontline tanks. Same with Nico. I think they're worse than Mumu and Mord for like tempo frontline. But I don't know, if you need a 2-star 3 cost frontliner, they're there. Lux actually got a pretty decent buff this patch, but I feel like, I don't know, at least what I've seen from people on ladder is that the Jax version still performs better. I played a game of like Lux Bruisers on my own. There's like some like 4 Bruiser, 5 EDM Lux build. I was not very impressed. I've seen the Jax version have much more success. And for 4 costs, got a little bit of a... Honestly, they didn't really shift that much in power this level. I think my perceptions around them shifted. I think the more I played last patch, this patch is pretty similar. The more I played last patch, the less I valued Ezreal and Viego Chosen, and the more I valued Poppy and Zed Chosen. I think Poppy is just incredible, and getting a Z2 for free is really, really good. This is mostly referring to the Heartsteel line, but they can also be very good for the Ahri melee line we'll discuss later. But obviously, if you like see Heartsteel Ezreal early on your rolldown, if you have the blue buff and the red buff and stuff like that, you still buy Ezreal. He's good. He's just gonna stabilize you less than the Poppy and the Zed, and it might be harder to go 9. I think Viego is still the best chosen for the PentaKill Superfan stuff, but he's not that much better than the other stuff. So I don't think he really deserves S tier. Then we have the Akalis. I think they're pretty decent. They're really, really strong when you do your roll down on stage 4. They start falling off later. Personally, in Karthus, I still play KD Akali, but true damage Akali can pop off with like true damage spell, obviously. Also, if you just have a Kiana, it's probably better to go true damage. Caitlyn as well. Caitlyn got buffed this patch, and you can often consider her in the Heartsteel line as your duo carry instead of Zed. As my rankings show, I think Zed is still better, but Caitlyn buffs made her a lot more viable in that spot, and she already was viable in that scenario last patch. People just didn't really realize it. We have Karthus. I think Karthus as a headliner is weaker than Akali and Viego, because I don't think Archangel's a very good Superfan item after his rework, but it still gives you a Karthus too. You still want to play Karthus. You probably still buy it if you're in the Penta line. It's just not as good as the other stuff. Then we have TF. I think TF is a decent amount better after the changes this patch. I don't think he's like S tier or anything. I don't know, he's playable. I have gone first with him this patch. He still has all the problems that TF used to have. It's just, if you can't get to the 5 costs, it's pretty worthless. Zac is like the worst headliner you want in the Heartsteel like AD Flex line. I've actually bought him a decent amount of times. Like sometimes you already have a Poppy 2, you already have like a Zac pair, you already have the Ezreal, and then you have no Zac, so you can just see Zac chosen. And then there's no way you're skipping that. Like, it's fine. Zac's got quite a few buffs, like, recently. Like, last few patches. I don't think he got one last patch. He's, like, a lot better of a unit than he was at the start of the set. In the poor tier, we have Ahri and Thresh. I don't think Ahri's, like, bad as a unit. I think Ahri's, like, probably around here if you're just, like, comparing unit base strength. But as a headliner, she's a little awkward because her headliner item is not BIS. It's usually better to go non-headliner Ahri, and you want to headliner one of the melees. We'll discuss that later. Yeah, you use her as, like, a non-headliner. If you're playing, like the old Sentinel Ahri build, though, having her as headliner is fine, though, because you don't really play Superfan in that. But if you're playing, like, any kind of Superfan Ahri comp, it's usually better to have your duo carry be your chosen. rather than Ahri. And then we have Thresh. Thresh is in 4 tier. I basically only buy this guy when I'm doing like the 4-2 roll down. I just need like some generic frontliner, but I don't want to roll to 0, so I just buy Thresh and then sell him later. That's what he does. And then we have Blitz tier. I would basically never buy Blitz in the same scenario I'd buy Thresh. Disco Blitz can be good for TF. That's about it. I don't really like buying him in flex scenarios. I think Zac, Thresh, and Poppy all clear him in that department. And then 5 costs, I don't really think it's worth talking about because they're rare. I think Yorick and Lucian are the best carries. Alawi 2 was really insane. Jin got buffed, he's fine. Ziggs is fine. These 2 are melee. They're whatever. I don't think it's worth talking about them that much. And now into the comps, into the S tier. Same as last patch. It's just Heartsteel AD Ezreal Z duo carry, whatever you want to call it. The only thing that they nerfed about this comp is they made sets less tanky and less damage, and they nerfed the amount of hearts you get from like killing units in the late game. So honestly, not that much of a nerf. So as expected, this comp is still S tier. Personally, I think it performs the best when you have Poppy 2 Z2. Like if I could choose 2 out of 3 upgrades, I would actually prefer to have 1-star Ezreal and 2-star Poppy, 2-star Z. But obviously you want to upgrade everything. You go 9, you fit in more Jazz units, you can start cutting like some of the heart steals maybe for 5 cost. But this is usually just your standard board on 8s. Obviously Bard over Lucian before you have Lucian. Very good comp. Easily the front runner of this meta. And this is like the version of it where you're not playing around Zed. I think this is weaker. However, with Caitlyn buffs, it's actually pretty decent. You want to like do a carry like, I mean, you want to cut one of these rapid fires, but it's usually like Ezreal with Caitlyn chosen. Like you're doing your Heartsteel world on, you see like 8-bit Caitlyn, you buy it, and you play something like a board similar to this. And then like late game, maybe you'd level, move items to Lucian, and then roll for like a frontline headliner or something. I don't know. Caitlyn can serve as your duo carry. I think it's a lot worse than Zed. She requires you to have like a lot more frontline. And also if you don't have exactly 8-bit chosen, you probably have to play a Garen, which is a little awkward. Yeah, you can make it work. You can also just cut Ezreal and Aphelios. Like honestly, this is what you probably should do. If you don't have Ezreal items, you can cut like both the Heartsteals and just play like Sentinel, a Bard, something, whatever makes sense. But yeah, I think that's a good way to cap your Heartsteel boards. I think it's worse than Zed, but if you can like go late game and like pivot out of like Caitlyn Garen entirely and play like the full 5 cost, like the Jin, Ziggs, Yorick, Thresh, all that trash. I mean, obviously this is probably going to win the game, right? I think like usually the items line up better for this pivot from the Caitlyn board. I think the default when you're rolling at level 8, you want the Zed version. And in S tier, I think this is like the sole S tier reroll comp for me, at least, is Kayle. And Kayle is broken. It doesn't really matter which headliner it is. Obviously, if you get PentaKill, you can like play an Edgelord or a KDA. If you get Edgelord, you can play another PentaKill or whatever. Her Superfan item is Rageblade, and I think Gunblade is always her best. Her last item, I think her best item is Rabadon's, but it can either be another Ginsu or Archangel. It's a rod item though. You can sometimes do GS if you low roll, but ideally it's double Ginsu, Rabadon's, or Archangel. I think Rabadon's is better. Then you want on tank mode, just whatever tank items you get. Often you can't go for Crown Guard. It's his best item, but you're using so many rods on Kayle, it's not very likely you actually get the rods for him. Play Superfan, and then you start leveling for stuff like Akali, maybe Kayn. Note that there is a bug on this patch with a Kayle headliner with her Superfan Rageblade. What the bug is that if you summon a unit, it will reset her Rageblade stacks. And by summon a unit, what I mean is when York summons a second ghoul that counts as a summon, when Zed casts it all and spawns a clone that counts as a summon, when Alawi respawns her tentacles, that counts as a summon. So if you have any of these 3 units, when they cast, your Rageblade stacks will go straight to 0, and you'll lose a bunch of DPS. Now, that's like a pretty big deal, because Yorick obviously fits in Kayle pretty well, and the way you can play around it is, 1, you just maybe don't play Yorick, which is a bummer, or 2, you can get a 3rd item for Kayle normally, and then just drop Superfans. Like if you find against you a late game carousel, or like stage 5 or something. I've dropped Superfans with this comp a decent amount of the time, and gotten to play around Yorick and won the game. If you can't do that, just don't play Yorick, and it's sad, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Yeah, S tier comp, very good. And now we're in A tier. The top of A tier, I think, is a Riven reroll. This comp got a lot better because of Caitlyn buffs, and also just Heartsteel cap's like a little bit lower now, so you're not necessarily losing to that many more Heartsteel players than you were. Obviously, they can still cap pretty high, but with the like lower hearts on kill, everyone's capping like a little bit less. So Riven can compete in the late game somewhat better. Her BIS hasn't really changed. QSS is necessary unless you have Banshees. If you have Banshees, just go for like another damage item or something, like an IE. Either IE or GS plus healing GS is better, but IE is fine. You want even shroud on your team, and you go for Caitlyn/Viego duo carry. After the Caitlyn buffs, it's probably always Caitlyn as your duo. The comp becomes so much better if you get to 6/8 bit, which is only possible with the spat. So definitely consider this comp if it's like a spat portal or something, or if you get an early spat on carousel. Without spat, it's a lot weaker. Note that the way you want to cap out this board is basically always like Lucian plus Jazz. Don't like try to go for like 5 or 7 edgelord. That is not good. Next in A tier, we have Ahri melee / Ahri warriors, whatever you want to call it. I think melee is easier to understand. I've talked about this in a couple of videos. The gist of it is that you have a non-headliner Ahri with normal Ahri items, Superfan frontline. Oh, you want a Spellweaver, or yeah, Spellweaver as well. Superfan frontline, and then you play a melee headliner. Akali gets Hodge, Poppy gets Warmogs, Viego gets Titans, Zed gets BT. I showed off what I probably think is BIS in setups like this, but honestly, the items can be very flexible. Generally, unless you have Poppy, once you have Poppy or Zed, you want like a healing item. Superfan gives like Zed and Akali healing, so. And you can even play 4 Superfan pretty often if you need healing. You don't necessarily have to have it, but yeah, you play like these like 6 units as a core. You get your headliner, and then you have one more slot on level 8 to like fill in the traits of this headliner. So say you get like EDM Zed, you probably want to play a Crowd Diver. You get like Edgelord Viego, you probably want to play Kayle and then drop one of the Superfans for an R. You get KDA Akali, you can play like the old 7 KDA board and play like Seraphine over Lulu and play 7 KDA. You get Poppy, you want to play Gnar for like 4 Superfan Mosher. Just like think about the game like that. If you get Spat in this line, True Damage Ahri can be really good instead of Nashers, and you go for True Damage Akali as your duo. I mean, very good comp, I think. That's about it. You can go level 9, you can cap around stuff like Yorick, Sona over Lulu, just random Alawi, random Kiana. Pretty good comp. Now we have Superfan PentaKill. Hasn't really changed since last patch, and like power-wise, they like slightly nerfed Karthus. I mean, they kind of reworked him. They gave him more AP on his cast, but like lower the damage of the cast even more. Honestly, he feels close. He feels about the same, honestly. We had a discussion on my Twitch a little bit about BIS Karthus, and honestly, my conclusion is that you just want like 1 mana, 1 like damage, and then 1 utility. Utility can either be like Shiv or anti-heal or healing. I wouldn't really worry about Karthus BIS that much. I think this build is like really good though, because like the guard breaker procs off the Shiv. Shiv got buffed recently. Shiv will like MR shred the whole backline, and you have the adaptive for mana, but don't worry about it too much. Also, if you have Superfan, take out like IE or something, and then pretend this is a Titans if it's Superfan Viego, or like take out guard breaker, then this is an Archangel for Superfan Karthus. The dream is that you get Akali, Viego, Karthus, and Yorick itemized. That's how you actually win games with this comp, but it can be a pretty good top 4 otherwise. If you have Pentaspat, it goes on Akali for 7 Penta. Yeah, that's about it. Okay, for another reroll comp, Superfan reroll, there's a lot of them. Superfan Seraphine / Lulu. They're actually very similar. One of them is you reroll on level 6 for Seraphine with Shojin, Morello, and then her Superfan item is Deathcap. And then you want to fill with like more Spellweavers, more KDA, depending on the chosen. And the other one is just you roll on level 7 for Lulu with Shojin, Blue Buff, Gunblade. And then you probably just fill with more Spellweavers and Ziggs and stuff. They play pretty similar. They play the exact same front line. To like determine which one you should play, you probably play Seraphine if you have Morello component and lots of Seraphines early. And you probably play Lulu if you could drop like a couple Lulus and lots of tiers. Yeah, no, that's about it. I think when you're playing Lulu, you probably want to go for Ahri specifically as your duo carry and not Seraphine. When you're playing Seraphine as your primary, as your headliner, you want to duo your Lulu or your Ahri. But yeah, both are good comps. I think Lulu is obviously better if you can hit, but 3-cost reroll is kind of hard to hit, especially since you actually want to 3-star your frontline as well in the ideal world. And Seraphine is cheaper, you get it online earlier. It's less strict of a BIS. I think it's kind of hard to get 2 tiers in this meta a lot of the time. You only need 1 tier for her, and it's like easier to push levels as well. Now we have Bard / MF. In my opinion, I basically only play this line with a Bard headliner. I don't think Kais is powerful enough, and I think MF comes online too late, because you're going to be rocking with her at 2-star for a little too long. Bard, you can 3-star pretty early. Bard BIS is blue buff, and then Rabadon / JG, and then adaptive is a Superfan item. Don't worry about hitting the Bard too early. The Dutes aren't actually as important as people think. They're still pretty important. You want it on like stage 3, but don't like roll a 0 for Bard. Jazz Chosen is much better than Dazzler, but you're probably not allowed to greet it with Bard scaling mechanic. Also for all these Superfan comps, items go on Nico or Echo, whatever you have itemized, whatever you have upgraded first. Nico 3 is better than Echo 3 as a tank, but usually you can't go for both. And then once you itemize Bard, you want to get tank items, and then you also want to itemize either Kaisa 3 or MF, depending on the scenario. Sometimes you get a bunch of Kaisas, sometimes you have That's Jazz Baby and you want to itemize MF, and then you want to push levels for Ziggs and Lucian. Another 2-cost Superfan reroll we have is Cat. Honestly, I haven't really played her that much because, I don't know, I just don't really find myself slamming JG very often, and I don't really prio Katarina to hold that much in the early game. But she's not bad. Ideally, you have Crowdiver chosen. You fit in 4 Crowdiver plus Echo on 7. I would, for this comp, I'd say roll for the Crowdiver Headliner on level 6. But once you have that, I wouldn't stay level 6. I would push level 7 so you can fit Echo plus 4 Crowdiver. It's a pretty big deal. I've also heard people say that Country Headliner is fine. I don't know about that. Maybe it is. Like on level 8, you get to fit a Thresh. It's just, I don't know. It feels pretty bad without Crowdiver Headliner. That's kind of why I avoid her. She's very strong. If you have Cat 3, 6 Crowdiver late game, she can definitely pop off. Now we have Senna Reroll, another 2-cost Superfan reroll. This one recently got buffed. It's pretty good. Her Superfan item is Shojin. I think her BIS is Rabadon's, like always. And then the last item, I'm actually not sure. I think it's like either like Gunblade, Nashor's, GS, Morello, something like that. I wouldn't worry that much about the last item, but you definitely just want the Rabadons online. Tank Echo in this comp because you're playing around true damage. And then you want to push levels for, if it's Rapid Fire chosen, don't play like a Rapid Fire. But if it's not Rapid Fire chosen, play a Rapid Fire. And then you just want to push level for stuff like Akali, Kiana, stuff like that. Just fill in your board, fill your traits out. Next we have 6 Executioner. This comp actually got nerfed decently hard, like the trait did. I actually haven't played any games on it this patch. It might be weaker than I think. Some Challenger players have told me that it's still pretty strong. Basically, you just want to 3-star Amumu, Samira, and Vex. I imagine it's still better than Country, just like the Country version. Country has never really been that impressive to me. Play 6 Executioner, play Samira, Vex, duo carry, Amumu frontline. Note that Amumu is not really as effective as a solo frontline if you don't have stone plates. I think when I play this comp, I prioritize stone plate almost more than anything. And for itemizing the backliners, they usually want 1 healing item. You want anti-heal somewhere in your comp, and just whatever damage amp and raw stats you can get. Like healing plus damage amp, raw stats, anti-heal, all good. You want one form of some form of shred as well. Maybe LW over like DB or something. And if you have a Twin Terror, the build didn't really change, it just got nerfed. You just play double Vex, drop the 6 Executioner, and then either like double your Samiras or double your Twitches and Vexes. You always want to play 2 Vexes though. Like 2 Vexes, 4 Executioner, plus double of whatever your duo carry is. And that's the Twin Terror setup. Next comp we have is just Jax. The Jazz Jax version, very similar to what was popular recently, like a few patches ago. Note that there are some people that have had success with like 4 to 6 Monster Jax because Urgot, since the last Jax patch, Urgot 4 and 6 Mosher all got buffed, and EDM got nerfed. I haven't really seen that much of that, so I can't really tell you how good that stuff is. But if you want to experiment and you natural a bunch of Urgots, it's definitely something to consider, like maybe over the Jazz. Basically, we want to be 3-starring our Jax with healing plus crit, and then getting tank items on Zac, secondary items on Lux, and just blowing up their whole front line. BIS Jax is Hodge JG +1. The True Biss, which is way better than anything else, is Zanya's, but obviously it's kind of hard to get a Zanya's. So you can go like BT, you can go Gunblade, you can go GS, you can go Rabadons, you can go second Hodge, you can go Titans, you can go Edge of Night. I think Edge of Night's overrated, but it's fine. You want like anti-heal, Morello and Lux's BIS, and then the other stuff is just whatever you have laying around. Take items on Zac. I've seen it do pretty well in my lobbies. I haven't really played a game of it myself, but I do think it's like strong if you get to it. Also have Annie as another Superfan reroll. It's the same Annie build everyone knows. EMO Annie chosen with Shojin Nashors as your items. Note, if you end up not playing Superfan for whatever reason, maybe you go for like a 4 emo build, playing around like a Mumu Poppy frontline instead for whatever reason. You actually don't want Shojin. Blue buff is actually better at 4 emo if that comes up. If you're playing just like the standard Superfan cookie cutter version, Shojin's better. Now we have TF. I think this comp last patch was pretty dead. They nerfed they buffed TF this patch. I think it's decent. I think it's just niche though. I basically never want to play this comp from Blue Streak. It's always just I'm like win streaking around either like the Disco opener or like the Seraphine opener, but I don't have a spot for Karthus, and I natural a bunch of the Disco units and I hit the TF really early. I'm high HP. I can use that HP to go 9 and then fit all the 5 costs. That's when TF shines. If you're rolling to 0 on 8, this comp is horrible. Don't play this comp. Play Karthus instead. That comp can actually top 4 on level 8. This comp probably averages like a 7 on level 8. But if you can go 9, if you hit the Alawi, you hit the Ziggs, you hit the Sona, pretty good. Obviously Disco Chosen is the best, so you can drop Taric. But I don't know, if you have Dazzler Chosen, this board gives you 4 Dazzler as well. I think this is the core. You can fit in Kiana, York, Thresh sometimes. Also Zac plus Lux over like a Lowy Ziggs as well. At very, very bottom of A tier, we have Yone. Notes, I don't think this comp is bad, but at least in my games, there's at least 2 Heartsteel players a game, usually more. And they're all playing around like Zed Yone, and it makes this comp very, very difficult to hit. I also think it's just worse power-wise than Riven right now. It still exists. Yone 3 with like the right augment setup with Crowddiver chosen can still do pretty well. You're still playing Zed as your duo carry. Zed is still really good, but yeah, just inconsistent. If you're in a lobby where people aren't playing Heartsteel for whatever reason, definitely consider Yone, but just too inconsistent right now. So honestly, he's probably like B tier in average, but I'll put him bottom in A because I don't really like because we're talking about B tier comps. Just to recap, in S tier, we have Heartsteel, both like Zed and non-Zed versions. We have Kayle Reroll in S tier as well. In A tier, we have Riven, Ahri, Warrior Superfan, Penta Superfan, just Karthus, Kayle, Viego trio carry, Lulu / Seraphine Superfan, Bard, Jazz Superfan, Katarina Superfan, Senna Superfan, 6/4 Exec, Twin Terror, no Twin Terror, Jax Reroll, Annie Superfan, TF, and Yone. Yeah, that's gonna be it. Hope you got something out of this. Peace.